Have you ever stopped to wonder how a conflict happening thousands of miles away can suddenly make it more expensive to fill up your car or even just to buy groceries? Well, it turns out a single geopolitical flashpoint can trigger a massive global economic shockwave. And today we're going to break down exactly how that happens.
Okay, so take a look at this. We're not talking about a stock or some weird crypto asset here. This is the price of crude oil, the very lifeblood of the global economy. Before a recent blockade in the Middle East, the price was hanging out around $65 a barrel. Then, almost overnight, it shot past 110. I mean, that is a jolt to the system even more severe than what we saw at the start of the war in Ukraine. So what on earth is behind this? Well, the answer lies in this tiny, tiny strip of water, which is, you could argue, the single most important energy choke point on the entire planet. Meet the Strait of Hormuz. So this is the only sea passage from the Persian Gulf out into the open ocean. That makes it basically the jugular vein for Middle Eastern oil. All of that black gold from the region has to squeeze through here to get to the rest of the world. So what's this number? $20 million. That is how many barrels of oil pass through that narrow strait every single day. Let's just put that into perspective for a second. Those 20 million barrels, that's a full 1/5 of all the oil the entire world uses in a day. It also handles a huge chunk of the world's natural gas. And here's the crazy part. Look at how fragile this whole thing is. The shipping lane for these gigantic tankers is only 3 kilometers wide. It's an incredibly vulnerable bottleneck. And, you'll see why this matters later, the vast majority of that energy is headed straight for Asia.
And here's how you shut the whole thing down without ever firing a single shot. See, you don't even need to sink the ships. You just have to make it financially impossible for them to pass through. Before this crisis, insuring a single tanker for the trip cost a few $100,000. Afterwards, it skyrocketed to between $3 and $5 million. That is a tenfold increase that just makes the voyage completely uneconomical, effectively shutting the strait right down.
Okay, so how does a problem in one little strait explode into a global shock? Well, it's because a crisis in the Persian Gulf never, ever stays regional for long. Its effects are felt instantly, and they're felt everywhere.
Right, so some people might be thinking, well, hold on, most of that oil goes to Asia, so it's their problem, right? Wrong. See, unlike a lot of other commodities, oil is a truly globalized market. When 20 million barrels a day are suddenly at risk of being taken offline, it just doesn't matter where that oil was supposed to go. The supply shock hits the entire global price, which means everyone, from Tokyo to Texas, feels that pain at the pump. Now let's zoom in on the world's largest economy. You might think the US is kind of insulated from this stuff, but a crisis like this actually reveals a major, major vulnerability. For the US government, a sustained oil price spike it's intolerable. And it's for two really big reasons. First, the political one. I mean, nothing sours the mood of voters faster than high gas prices and rising inflation. It hits everybody every single day. And second, the economic reason. Rising inflation forces the Federal Reserve to do the one thing a high-debt economy absolutely dreads: raise interest rates, which can slam the brakes on the entire economy.
And this right here shows a fascinating and totally counterintuitive market reaction. So when the crisis hit, you'd think gold, the classic safe haven against inflation, you'd think it would soar and the dollar would fall. But after a little spike, the exact opposite happened. Why? Well, it's because the market isn't just reacting to inflation itself, it's reacting to the fear of the central bank's response to inflation. The expectation of those rate hikes makes the dollar stronger and assets like gold way less attractive. It's like the fear of the cure is actually greater than the fear of the disease.
So why does oil have this much power over everything?
To really get that, we need to take a step back and look at the world's entire energy diet. What actually powers our planet?
At the end of the day, it's pretty much a three-way split between the fossil fuel giants: oil, coal, and natural gas. You put them all together, and they account for over 80% of all the energy we consume. Yeah, renewables are growing, but for now, we live in a world that is built on hydrocarbons.
And when we zoom in on the oil trade specifically, the key players become crystal clear. The Middle East is the world's top dog exporter, followed by Russia. And on the other side of that equation, the biggest importers are China and Europe. This is pretty much the basic map of how global oil flows. So here's a really crucial point. There's a huge difference between being the biggest importer and being the most dependent. China, for sure, imports the largest sheer volume of oil, but oil only makes up about 18% of its total energy mix. But for countries like South Korea and Japan, oh man, imported oil is a much, much larger slice of their energy pie. And that means a supply disruption from the Middle East is an existential threat to their economies in a way that it just isn't for others. All right, so with all the talk about a green transition, what does the future actually hold? I mean, is the era of fossil fuels finally coming to an end? Just let this number sink in for a moment. 60%. Yep, that's the projected share of fossil fuels in our global energy mix in the year 2050. So, despite the rapid growth of renewables, the world is still going to be overwhelmingly powered by oil, gas, and coal for decades to come. The fights over these resources, they are not going away anytime soon. So what does this all mean for the next 30 years? Well, first, oil is going to remain the main event. It's the primary battleground of energy geopolitics. Second, natural gas, especially transported by sea as LNG, is going to become more and more important. And finally, as this green transition really picks up steam, a whole new competition is going to heat up over the critical minerals we need for batteries and renewals. We're talking about things like lithium, copper, and cobalt. So today, we saw how one narrow strait can hold the entire global economy hostage. And our reliance on these energy sources, it's not ending tomorrow. This leaves us with one critical question. We know the world will still run on fossil fuels for decades to come. So where will a next choke point be?